Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us for the Indie Forum Digital. We're on our second day, halfway through the second day, and if you managed to catch us this morning for Willem's Ice Cream for Everyone digital seminar, hopefully you enjoyed it, but now we are on to healthcare and we're looking forward to that very much. My name is Stephanie Fox from the Network One. I'll be introducing Paul, who will be moderating this webinar. So before I introduce Paul, I'm just going to go through some basic housekeeping. You might have heard this before, but patience, please. Paul will give a 5-minute introduction. Then we will have the panelists speaking. They'll all have about 10 to 12 minutes to talk. We'll then have a Q&A at the end, and we're aiming to finish 5 minutes before the hour so you can get to your next virtual appointment. Please, everyone, keep your microphones muted at all times, unless you're being called on to ask a question. In that case, you can unmute yourself, but other than that, please do keep muted. That being said, if you'd like to keep your video on, that would be great, so that our speakers have some friendly faces to present to. We will have a Q&A portion right at the end, but if you have any questions in the meantime, you can send them directly to Paul Squirrel in the chat. So if you go to your chat box where it says to, there should be a drop-down menu, and instead of everyone, just select Paul Squirrel. You can also send them to me, Stephanie, or my colleague Lizzie, and we'll pass them over, but probably easier to just send them straight to Paul. Paul will go through all of the questions and we'll select a few to ask the speakers once they've finished speaking. If you would like to ask questions to the speaker yourself, just type "I'll ask" or something like that next to your question in the chat box. Paul will then call on you to ask your question. And please don't forget to say which speaker you're directing it to. If you prefer for Paul to ask a question on your behalf, again, say which speaker you'd like to direct it to, and just tell Paul that you prefer him to ask the question. Hopefully you'll have your Zoom viewing mode set to speaker view. If not, just click speaker view at the top right of your screen. The speakers will be showing slides on their screen. If you can't see their speaker window when the slides are on the screen, just select show active speaker video. If you have any technical issues, message my colleague Lizzie Gold either directly in the chat, or you can email her at lizzie.gold@thenetwork1.com. This webinar will be recorded, so if you prefer not to take notes, that's totally fine. If for any reason the system crashes, you should have your own unique link that you use to sign in with today. So just click back in and sign in with that. Thank you very much for patiently listening to that. I would now like to introduce my colleague Paul Squirrel, who is director of the Network One, and he will be moderating this session. Paul started his agency career in London in 1995. He's worked for several independent agencies and also within DAS Omnicom as an account director and new business director. During the dot-com boom, he co-founded Creative Brief, an online agency client marketplace, before joining Julian at the Network One in 2006. Today, amongst other things, mostly IT related, he is responsible for looking after our African and global healthcare networks. Paul will readily admit to being terrified by the sight of his own blood, a phobia he tried to overcome by marrying an NHS nurse. Without further ado, I will now turn over to Paul.
Thanks, Steph. Yeah, well, obviously the phobia didn't go away and I ended up with a whole host of other issues, but nevertheless, it was a plan at the time. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to my kitchen and also this afternoon's Indie Forum digital webinar, Healthcare's Big Reset. I think it's probably safe to say that 6 months ago, not so many of us would have considered adding PPE to our Amazon shopping baskets, and probably weren't paying much to a little known new virus rampaging through Wuhan in China. Well, how much life has changed for us all, eh? COVID-19 has reshaped almost every aspect of our world, with the health and life sector experiencing a quantum shift in focus overnight. Whilst the healthcare sector has admirably risen to the immediate challenges the disease has presented, they're all too aware of the bigger and more fundamental ones that lie just across the horizon. Can governments and everybody in the health and life ecosystem attempt to understand, define, and build what will be needed in our new COVID reality? To discuss healthcare's big reset, I am so delighted to be joined by three inspirational agency leaders from the UK, from India and the USA today. Thank you all for joining us. Claire Bates is going to kick off. Claire is from Page and Page. Oh, there we go. And Steffi, Claire is from Page and Page. She is a content director there, and she's on a mission to create high insight driven content that inspires behavioural change, in particular in healthcare. Claire trained as a journalist and has a unique content background, both in publishing, where she launched and edited leading industry title Pharmaceutical Marketing Europe, and in medical communications across a diverse range of therapy areas. She's been developing content for 20 years across sectors, including oil and gas, corporate finance, reinsurance, healthcare, working with companies such as Philips Publishing, Thomson Reuters, NewsQuest, Omnimed, and Omnicom agency, Synergy Medical Communications. Today, Claire's presentation is entitled Metamorphosis, a Sector in Transformation. Claire, the digital forum is yours.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all well and that you're adjusting to either working from home or working back in the office, whichever one it is that you're currently doing. As Paul said, I am Claire Bates. I am content director at creative communication agency Page and Page. As a journalist, when I sat down to write this, I was resolutely determined not to focus on words like uncharted and unprecedented. But as I got to working on it, I realised that actually they were still the best way of encapsulating the events of the past few months and a good way of describing the resulting change in behaviour that we've seen. COVID-19 has and will continue to change us all. In fact, when it comes to change, we've barely started. This is basically the tip of the iceberg and the real shift is yet to come. The global community is in the grip of human and economic loss, the like of which we aren't accustomed to seeing in peacetime. But history tells us that people don't experience losses like this and remain unchanged. Equally, the crisis has been a reboot for humanity, one that has enabled us to see in sharper focus that our pre-COVID lifestyles probably weren't all that they were cracked up to be. And amid all this, we've got an opportunity to harness the good that's come from the situation, one of which is the closing ozone hole, someone told me the other day. So we've had everything more time with family to global collaboration with companies that we never imagined would cooperate, supermarkets, for example, in the UK. We have an opportunity to change behaviours, our own as much as those of other people. That the road to economic recovery is going to be long and bumpy is something that we really can't get away from. Figures from McKinsey put current global government deficits at between $9 trillion and $11 trillion for 2020, and this is likely to rise to 30 trillion by 2023. These are eye-watering numbers for sure, but some of the most successful brands were born out of adversity. Burger King, CNN, Airbnb, to name a few, all launched into bear markets. There won't be an abundance of available investment in the coming years, and cost containment is going to play a large role in the recovery process, whether that's in healthcare or in other sectors. It will be particularly prevalent in healthcare simply because of the strain on resources that COVID has given us. Governments, regulators and health systems will be focused like never before on finding ways of reducing wastage, whether it's state-run or insurance-funded systems. A likely focus will be reducing medicines wastage through increased patient concordance. An average of around 50% of medicines are wasted each year as a result of patients not taking their treatment as intended. This has huge implications, not just for the health of the patient. The price of not taking medication is high, and the drain on multiple resources from ambulatory care to hospital stays is real. Ask any medic about medicines concordance and they will roll their eyes to the ceiling. For the pharma industry, this renewed emphasis on concordance is an opportunity to develop better ways to support healthcare professionals in the delivery of patient care. And this is where we can come in. We as human beings are not good at being told what to do, especially after a prolonged period of constantly being told what we can do and where we can go. To improve concordance, the dynamic will have to change to one where patients feel a sense of their ownership over their treatment journey, and healthcare communicators can play a large role in this. Before the pandemic, this might have seemed like a big ask, but now anything seems possible. We've already witnessed behaviour change. Pharma companies have taken collaborative working to the next level and are using technology in a way that few had thought possible, from remote clinical trials and monitoring to at-home shipments. COVID-19 has proved to be the accelerant needed to catalyse the faster adoption of available technology and drive behaviour change. It's already signalled a change in the traditional healthcare professional patient appointment, with remote consultations now commonplace and the first step in a new age triaging system. They will likely be loathed by some and liked by others, patients and HCPs alike. But nevertheless, this evolution is something that's not likely to leave us long after a vaccine is found. Similarly, there's been a huge explosion in the use of digital by healthcare professionals as they seek out information. It turns out that they actually really were quite open to the idea of remote engagement and a different way of doing things. Who knew? Most of us certainly didn't. And this could really help in addressing the concordance conundrum that we currently face. According to Viva, there's been a 2,347% increase in online meetings and traffic to websites. That's a rise of 50% since January. Yet only 20% of HCPs believe that they can access the information they need to support clinical decision making. So currently there is a big gap to fill. Figures from IQVIA even before COVID-19 illustrated that HCPs are on board with and advocates of remote engagement, and overall satisfaction with these ranges from 91% to 95%. Figures also show us that remote engagement has a positive impact on prescribing, with 73% of healthcare professionals saying that they were likely to prescribe an e-detailed product. If this isn't an opportunity for the industry, it's hard to know what is. But it's not just about technology, and nor should it be. Concerns have already been raised from the World Health Organization about the potential for healthcare inequity, in particular in least developed countries, that could result from the heavier reliance on technology. And let's not forget that platform use doesn't disguise poor communication. It might even highlight shortcomings. Of greater importance is the provision of more relevant, more timely information to support clinical decision making, and the tools they need, and the development of patient relationships based on trust. We need to move from a push to a pull model, one where HCPs are initiating a conversation about what they need and the tools they require from pharma, and a little less about what the pharmaceutical industry wants to tell healthcare professionals about its products. Through better support of healthcare professionals, the industry could really be instrumental in the changing behaviour of patients so that they gain a better understanding of why it really is so important to take medicines correctly. The focus needs to shift from talking about product and the environment, which in recent years has been characterised by self-care and shared care, to thinking far more deeply about the patient, the implications for them, and the weird, quirky human being that sits at the centre of all of this. The move to talking about benefits above features may seem really obvious, and in a consumer-led environment, it is key to everything. Yet there are stalwarts of industry that are still very much focused on the latter when it comes to healthcare. So a change in behaviour is needed here. As much as this is about increased support for healthcare professionals, it's also about getting a successful product to market. Success that will hinge not just on efficacy and efficiency, although these will always take centre stage. Success and indeed market access will likely be driven as much by support frameworks around the product and how it is used as the product itself. The suggestion here isn't that the pharma industry is not considering drug delivery and concordance, more that it needs to do so much, much earlier in the product life cycle to ensure that they get a successful product to market and on formularies in a world where improving concordance, reducing waste and achieving cost savings will be more important than ever. While we're headed into uncharted territory, there are opportunities ahead to help improve patient lives and secure some semblance of economic recovery. I'm now going to hand over to the other speakers so they can take us on the next leg of our exploration into healthcare's hard reset. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Claire. That was great. We'll actually just hold all the questions, if you don't mind, right until the end, and then we'll come back to them then. So if you've got any questions for Claire, if you just want to make a note, send it to me in the chat, then we'll pick it up at the end, because I'd like to move on now to our next presenter, all the way from the other side of the world, over to India, to Asia, and that's Praful Akali. Praful is founder of Medulla Communications. Praful founded Medulla 10 years ago in India. He's one of the world's most awarded healthcare creators and strategists. He started the agency after almost a decade with brands such as Boots and Pfizer. The agency is now recognized as one of the world's leading independent agencies and is ranked 4th by the Effies globally, and is the only healthcare agency in that list. Medulla won a Healthcare Lion in 2016, and today Praful is going to be talking to us about COVID-19 and the ominous title, COVID-19, Destroying Health, Rebuilding Healthcare. Praful, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Yeah, I was actually going to start the same way as you, where I was going to say, welcome to my bedroom to the audience, and I said that didn't quite sound right. So I stopped myself there. Yeah, coming to the topic, I think it is a time of irony in that sense, and especially in healthcare. It's very interesting how the pandemic, the virus, is destroying the health of people, and we wish we were not in this position, as a society. But now that we are, we also need to recognize that this is the huge opportunity for rebuilding healthcare for those of us who are in the space. So that was an irony I thought I'd kind of call out to everyone. Just going ahead. Yeah, and before we get into why is it an opportunity, let's just take a few steps back. What I find really interesting is that healthcare is a very complex ecosystem, right? We've got hospitals and physicians, consumers and patients, and pharma, biotech, medical device industries, government and NHS, and a lot more that I haven't even mentioned out here so far. Why does that how does that connect to the opportunity? And this is why. What typically happens in complex ecosystems when you're looking at adopting digital is either, so far, at least in healthcare, it's been all for one, but none for all. And what I mean by that is until everyone migrates to a complete digital ecosystem, everyone is comfortable using that, each stakeholder is comfortable with that, you do not see the full benefits of a digital ecosystem. And healthcare, unfortunately, was one of the sectors where we hadn't adopted healthcare digital to the extent that we should have. Now, let's look at a few examples of that. Let's look at telemedicine. Jan 2020, if you look at hospitals and physicians, and this is across the world, I was actually going to give this as an example of what's happening in India. Then I did a little bit of homework. I realized that it's pretty true across the world. Physicians and hospitals were making patients wait for hours, but were not adopting telemedicine, which could have changed that. Consumers and patients were delaying their doctor visits as much as they could, but were not adopting telemedicine as much as they could have. Pharma, biotech, med devices, I was earlier going to say it's not strictly applicable for them, but I realized that they could have played a role as enablers, and they haven't fully done that on telemedicine. Government and NHS, again, I was going to say this is an Indian thing where we didn't have telemedicine guidelines, and then within the month of the lockdown, in fact, 15 days of the lockdown in India, we had telemedicine guidelines available. But I've heard it's pretty similar across the world. There were HIPAA restrictions, which has since been kind of loosened a little bit in the US from a telemedicine perspective that allows it to flourish a little bit more. That's changed completely at every step in the ecosystem. So we've all adopted digital and therefore adopted telemedicine. And therefore it's a big opportunity for us to similarly enable ourselves digitally as a healthcare industry a lot more. Let's take another quick example of this. Virtual meetings and digital communication to physicians. Again, from a Jan 2020 perspective, we all know that physicians were too busy to see sales reps, and still only a few would be insisting on virtual meetings. Consumers and sorry, I actually meant to say medical reps out here. They were frustrated and stressed. They were not able to create an impact with the old communications model. The industry was arguably moving slowly in spite of making all the right noises on this. The government on digital communication to physicians had policies in certain markets that did not allow for nimble digital first communication. They do not use the transparency of digital comms were not utilized in regulations. Suddenly we see all of this changing thanks to COVID, right? So what COVID-19 has really pushed each of us is from a situation as a healthcare stakeholder where we could have moved the industry into digital. And we used to say, yes, it's important, I must do this tomorrow. To, oh my God, I should have done this yesterday. I wish I had done this yesterday. That's a big move for us. So what I'm kind of gonna do over the next 5 minutes is, a panel discussion like this is not really the best place to talk about all the opportunities. But you realize that the moment we can more comprehensively move towards a digitalization of healthcare, where every stakeholder is adopting it digitally a lot more, so very interesting opportunities that come up. I'm just going to take you through about 3 or 4 of them fairly quickly, and let's see how whether that's kind of able to get us thinking a little bit more. Let's look at healthcare delivery. If even half of the doctor consultations were converted online, it would save each patient over 2 days a year. Yeah, and still we haven't been adopting online doctor consultations as much as we could as an industry. So this is one huge opportunity to kind of build on this even further. If you look at analytics, so let's look at communication to doctors. A lot of us are in the pharma and the healthcare industries. We kind of do communicate to healthcare professionals a lot. Now imagine if a medical rep could review the brand information that the doctor has engaged with online in the last week, just before meeting the doctor. If a sales rep or a medical rep of a pharmaceutical organization could actually review all of this online. And this would be possible if we tracked all the brand information that we were passing on to a doctor. We tracked that, and we had analytics in place to measure all of that. And India is supposedly a hub both for IT tools as well as for big data. We have been doing a lot of stuff. So we at Medulla, in fact, said that can we be kind of pushing and providing analytics at an individual doctor level that has not been available to the industry globally so far, and we're so close to having a breakthrough on that we can announce fairly soon. And I think when we're able to do that, of course, within regulations, within privacy norms, that's when even for doctors, it's extremely empowering to know that, hey, I saw something online and the medical rep is not making me listen to the exact same stuff all over again. We're moving on in life, we're kind of doing new conversations. So this is one piece. The third opportunity I wanted to call out today is if you look at physician segmentation. What a lot of us don't realize is when we are targeting doctors, we typically end up targeting doctors basis geographies. It's the same medical rep meeting doctors in a particular geography. They tend to do similar conversations because there are similar biases from the sales rep in that sense. But the moment we're not restricted to geographies, even when the medical rep is involved, there's a lot of virtual consultations and there are a lot of virtual, conversations with the physician. Suddenly we can segment doctors not based on geographies, based on prescription habits, based on psychographics. it's a whole new world out there that we could possibly be moving towards. Yeah, and the last opportunity that I kind of thought was a little interesting, and these are just small snippets just to get us all looking at things from a particular perspective, is when you're planning for multiple routes of communication. Yeah, that's an extremely busy highway. Thankfully, I haven't seen anything like this in India. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But instead of 1 to 2 contact points a month, if we have 8 to 10 contact points with doctors, with physicians on physical and digital media, then imagine the amount of communication opportunities that we have. Number one. Number two, multiply that by the customer segments. And we're talking about 20 contact points a month. Who is building the communication for these contact points? Which agencies are doing that? Who's building these videos, detailers, mailers? Are there scope for tie-ups between agencies? Can we look at low-cost production centers? Again, India, hello, we're putting our hands up. We kind of, there is a certain place where different agencies can partner together to help clients do more communication for the same amount of money, get a lot more value and a lot more bang for the buck, as one would say. And just the last slide that I want to end with, once you've got a few of these opportunities in our heads, is we can't rebuild healthcare without rebuilding ourselves. And that's what each of us must look at as clients or as agencies. Back to you, Paul, again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Praful. Thank you. Very interesting. We'd now like to go to our final speaker, and we're going to zoom across from early evening in India across to very early morning in the USA in Boston, and we welcome Carolyn Morgan. Carolyn, good morning. Carolyn is the president of Precision Effect, the USA's only advertising agency working with innovative healthcare companies to change standards of care. In addition to her role at Precision Effect, Carolyn also oversees the HCP, patient and consumer service offerings for precision, value, and health. She's also an experienced veteran when it comes to creating and manifesting a work-life balance for her employees. Carolyn is currently raising 4 children, 2 sets of twins. Boy, Carolyn, I thought I had it bad, homeschooling 2 teenagers. Today, Carolyn is addressing something that's probably close to a lot of our hearts, which is life after COVID. What does the healthcare agency of 2021 look like? Carolyn, over to you.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate everyone's time and attention today. You know, it's been a fascinating time, and when Paul was chatting with me about, you know, what does the healthcare agency of 2021 look like, I really sat back and thought about that, and I think it was Winston Churchill who said, we're at the end of the beginning, and I think that that's really true. We've never experienced such change like we have in the past 6 months. I mean, if you think about your holiday period in December compared to where we have been now, it is amazing. One of my colleagues said to me recently, which I thought was a really good way to kind of sum up this seismic shift that we're all experiencing, is, you know, we're taking the 1918 flu pandemic, the Great Depression, and then here in the United States, the civil unrest of the 60s, and we've rolled that all into a 3-month period. And that's pretty intense by anybody's standards. And so how do we rethink and reimagine what the future looks like when we're in the middle of it being reimagined for us? I found a Bain article, which I really liked, which talked about the fact that as we're thinking about opening our businesses and going back into the office, we need to think about how we're going to advance, retreat, adapt, and repeat. And I think that that's going to be really a good mantra for all of us to follow in the coming months, if not years, you know, because we're going to need to be, as agencies, the definition of agility. You know, never before have we had to reevaluate how we're going to pull innovation into our businesses as quickly and as efficiently as we are right now. And I think that that is going to be here to stay. And I think ultimately, as we're thinking about this all and we're thinking about these seismic shifts, you know, we need to be paying attention to what does that mean for our employees? What does that mean for our client relationships? What does that mean for the provider and the patient? You heard a little bit about that before. And ultimately, what does that mean for us as human beings, and how do we want to re-engage with our agencies and our employers as we return back to whatever the new normal is going to look like? You know, it's interesting because I think for so many of us, you know, we were either very binary in how we wanted to approach remote employees, right? It was either we were an agency that was all for it, and most of our employees were in fact virtual and remote, to, you know what, we need to be in the office and we need to be talking to one another, and that's where creativity really blooms. And we found ourselves really all being very much forced into a virtual environment, and I think if anything, we've seen that we can in fact do it. Being very fortunate in the healthcare industry, you know, we've all received, I think, a good amount of work from our clients as we've had to transition them online. And, you know, our teams have been responding, and they've been doing that. They've been consulting, they've been strategizing, they've been developing creative, and they've been implementing that creative really kind of seamlessly. And I thought it was interesting, according to a McKinsey research article, 80% of people questioned report that they enjoy working from home. 41% say they're more productive, and 28% say they are just as productive as they were pre-COVID. I think, you know, many employees are finding that they're liberated, you know, from long commutes and from travel. Business travel is going to change as we move forward, and they find more productive ways to spend their time, and they're also able to balance that with the things that they enjoy personally. And I think we've seen a big change in how we think about our jobs versus our personal lives throughout this period of the last 6 months. You know, for so long we were running so hard and so fast, and in fact, I think our lives are fitting around our jobs, and I think we're going to see that shift as we move forward. And once again, we're going to see our jobs fitting around our lives. And as agency employers, we need to think about what does that look like and how are we going to adapt to that? You know, a virtual employment is now a reality, and we need to think about what that looks like. You know, how do we think about Zoom meetings and making sure that we're giving people Zoom breaks? It is a long day for all of us right now as we're sitting on these Zoom meetings, and we are getting very, very much so fatigued, and we have to be thoughtful about that, especially when we're trying to create a creative product. You know, there's cloud-based tools now that we're all leveraging and we're all implementing into our different agencies that are enabling us to route, review, edit, and produce work very efficiently and effectively, which is keeping us on time and on budget. But the truth remains that, you know, so many people pre-COVID have changed their ways, and we need to think about what that's going to mean moving forward. You know, just for Precision Effect and Precision Scientia, the two agencies that I oversee, we recently surveyed all of our employees to see what is their comfort level. You know, because even when the governments around the world enable us to reopen and start to reemerge from our caves and our small holes where we are, you know, we're going to find ourselves thinking about things in a very different way. And, you know, when we looked at our employee base of those 400 employees, we found that most, if not all, pre-vaccine want to stay at home, which is a big change from what we would have seen if we had done the survey 6 months ago. When we asked them if they could imagine the future in which COVID was no longer a concern, still a majority of them, you know, a third of them decided that they would prefer to work from home or only be in the office 1 to 2 days a week. That is a big shift on how we are working together. And so while we were able to turn on the lights on virtual, when we go back into the world of some people are at home and some people aren't, what is that going to look like and what is that going to feel like? And I think as employers, we really need to be thinking that through. When we're all kind of in it together, we're able to produce. When we have people that are back out into the real world and thinking about things in a different way and doing what suits them, that's going to change that dynamic pretty significantly, and we really need to think that through. Because as we start to reemerge, we're going to have other issues. You know, as we think about masks and social distancing inside offices, you know, that too does not really say, okay, how are we going to create a really nice brainstorm today and come up with great new ideas for our clients? But I think more importantly, it's also how are we emotionally supporting our team members during this time? You know, there are a lot of people who are missing that personal connectivity, and we need to be making sure that we're reaching out to them. And so as agency partners and as colleagues and as people who love to collaborate, we really need to be thinking about that. Are we asking our team members and each other, how are we doing, and what is it that they need during this time? And how do we increase the opportunity for them to be interacting on a one-on-one basis and really also thinking about teamwork and that creativity? I think the other thing from an employer standpoint and working with our employees, we're now going to really rethink how we hire. It's no longer going to be who is local, it's going to be who is best. And I think we're going to be able to really achieve the best talent across all geographies, which is really going to be amazing and open up our agencies to such wonderful, diverse talent across the world that we probably would have not done before this had happened. And what an awesome opportunity that is for all of us to diversify and think about the types of employees that we're bringing into our worlds. And not only that, where we can find them. And, you know, really ensuring now that we've seen that this has happened, that this is a very real potential. So working with our HR teams to now think that through, you know, when we are thinking about hiring someone, how wide do we cast that net from a geography perspective, and what does that really look like? And I think also, ultimately, one of the things that we're going to need to think about with that is, how do we onboard new employees? What does that look like? You know, if you can't really immerse somebody in your culture immediately, we're going to have to work really hard to be able to do that remotely. And that is a big challenge. You know, thinking through, you know, portals and mentorship and, you know, what is it that we're going to do to make that feel really seamless and really good for a new employee? Because we all know that that first 30 to 90 days is so key in their overall satisfaction. Shifting gears a little bit and thinking also about our client and what that dynamic looks like, it has changed a lot. You know, not only are we going to have to respond to what our employees need and want as we come back and continue to deal with our new normal, we're going to have to also think about what we're doing with our clients. How are we servicing them differently and more effectively? But not only that, but what does that relationship look like in this new normal for us? You know, a survey from Binary Platform said that the biggest area that has been cut in terms of spending are media and paid advertising, which isn't surprising, contractors and team members, which is a little bit surprising from a pharma perspective. And then, you know, they're now focusing more on telemedicine, as we heard our other speakers talking about, and SEO. What I thought was interesting, however, and surprising in the survey is that both email marketing and content marketing had dropped from pre-COVID to now, which I think is going to be something that we're going to see shift pretty dynamically as we continue to move forward. Because I think our clients are now thinking about digitization in a way that they never had. You know, the pharma industry is notorious for being really behind when it comes to digital. And I think it's fair and not far-reaching to say that we really advanced digitization by about 5 years during this pandemic. You know, not only did we have to quickly move all of our clients to online and digital tools, we needed to make sure that we were rethinking what that was going to look like. And I think that's going to continue to be true. How are we pivoting and providing our clients with what is at the forefront of digitization and transformation, and enabling that we're not only educating them, but providing with the metrics and the data and the information they need to be able to deploy these tools in a way that feels very comfortable for them. I also think that, you know, one of the pieces that we have to be very thoughtful about is really reimagining and stepping back. Our strategy teams need to step back and think about, what does that physician experience look like? What does that patient journey look like? It has changed dramatically. And we need to be thinking that through when we're talking about how we're reaching out to physicians. You know, what is it that they're dealing with every single day is very different. We've heard a lot about telemedicine today, and I think our physicians are feeling very confident about what it is that they're doing. But I think that, you know, and they're saying that they're, you know, the data is showing that they're spending more time with the patients, and they're feeling really good about it. But they're feeling fatigued, and they are feeling tired because they're exerting so much more energy. And so that leaves little time for them to do other things, like find education and seek out other information on different products. So we're going to need to be really thoughtful about how we are approaching the physicians during this time. You know, how are we deploying all the different mediums at our disposal to be able to provide them with bite-sized information that's giving them the data that they need to be able to do their jobs as effectively as possible. I think that also holds true with how we want to interact. I know that Claire had noted earlier, it's no longer about what pharma wants to impart, but it's about what the physicians want to receive. And I think that is very, very true. How do we set up virtual trade shows? How do we rethink the entire rep experience? You know, they're no longer going to be calling on them in person. So what does that look like? And how do we provide them information pre, during, and post rep interaction that feels a little bit more organic and user generated? I think that's going to be a big change for us. And I think we're going to need to help our clients really rethink that. I think the other big dynamic that we're seeing right now with our clients is that, you know, they are expecting really fast turnarounds. And that, you know, that's been an age-old truth. And I think that that's not going to stop now. As we need to become more and more agile, we really need to think about that. And never is that more true than what we see in broadcast and video. You know, and I think that's about us wanting to change and needing to change as an industry, how we want to produce those things. We've always thought about TV and video as needing to be the highest quality and the highest level of production output. And I think that has changed. Look at our setting here today. You know, we're all much more comfortable with seeing things in their raw form than we ever have been. And I think we need to be thinking about, what does that user generated content look like? How can we leverage old B-roll? How does animation play a part so that we can quickly turn these bite-sized pieces of content that our physicians are going to be needing in a differentiated way around for our clients very quickly. And so really rethinking about production as a whole, I think, is going to be a big piece of the puzzle as we move forward. And then ultimately, as I was mentioning, you know, the relationship with our clients. In some ways, it's never been closer. We're seeing into each other's lives. We shared a very real, very, very big experience together where we talked about our worries. On the flip side of that, we've never been further apart. You know, we're an industry that thrives on that human interaction and that connectivity, and we don't have that right now. So we need to take it upon ourselves as the agency partners to think about that and think about, how do we make each meeting creative? How do we make each meeting engaging? How do we make sure that it's useful? I think we need to re-examine how and when we're presenting creative work. Are we sending boards again like we used to do in the old days? Are we, maybe presenting individually versus all at once? There's a lot of different ways that we need to be rethinking. Are we doing polls? Are we doing breakout groups? How do we keep that engagement lively so that it doesn't feel like yet another Zoom meeting on the calendar that we all are feeling right now? But it can be exhausting. And by the time you hit 4 o'clock in the afternoon, even though we used to be a break in their day, that's no longer the case. So how are we rethinking and reimagining all of that? I'll end by saying, the provider, we talked about this already, and I think that this is a fascinating stat. How do we think about helping our clients when we come to telemedicine? We ourselves need to become better educated on what that experience looks like and how they're going to be talking to the patients and what that needs to feel like for them. But Smithsonian Magazine reported in February in Boston, Massachusetts, the month before COVID even hit, that one of the largest health systems here, Partners, which has Mass General and other major institutions as part of it, treated 1,600 patients via video. In April, that was 242,000. That is a giant leap. And that is a tipping point. And that is going to change all things moving forward, how patients are experiencing healthcare, how providers are providing healthcare, and ultimately how our clients are interacting with the providers and providing information in new and unique ways. And all of that with employees and agency teams that are doing it in ways that they haven't done it before. It certainly is a new day. And I think one of the things that's great about independent agencies is we are so agile. We have so much ability. This moment was really made for us. We know how to change on a dime. We understand behavior change so very well because we're doing it all the time to ensure our clients are getting what they need. And so I think one of the biggest things that I will close with and really encourage everyone out there to think about is, I think our biggest concern that we as agency team members and leaders need to be thinking through is, how do we make sure our culture thrives during this time? How do we make sure that new employees and employees who have been with us for a very long time and clients all feel that we are in this together and that we're infusing energy into all of our different meetings? Thank you. Back to you, Paul.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carolyn. Really appreciate that. And thank you to all of our panelists today who have contributed. I think you'll all agree it's been an absolutely fascinating half hour or so of presentation. We're now going to open up the floor a little bit. We've got a few minutes and we've had some questions in. So if the panelists could all unmute their microphones, because some of these are quite general. So this one's actually probably for Claire. Oh, hang on a second, it's just jumped up the screen. Is the popular sympathy and admiration for HCPs going to help patients trust them more, therefore could be more compliant in the future?
I think so, if I'm honest. I've had this discussion with a number of people, and I think that to see the sacrifice that has been made by healthcare professionals on the front line who have endangered themselves, arguably, especially speaking specifically about the UK, where there's been a paucity of PPE, both in secondary care and even more so in the home care sector, in nursing homes. I think it will, and I think we needed to see a return to that. I think we need to see a return to there being more trust. Whether or not we've got the ability to trust the digital systems that we're going to have to use in order to be able to have that relationship, I think is another question and another dynamic that, as Carolyn was saying, we're going to all have to try to get over, because it kind of is the way forward. It really is. Once we see how little, or how big an impact rather, it makes on relieving the burden on healthcare systems to use technology, I think we'll have to adapt. We'll have to continue to adapt with the speed that we've done in recent months.
Okay. Anybody else like to add to that? No. Okay. I think we had a question from Tiffany Whale. Tiffany, are you there? No. Hello, Tiffany.
Hey, Paul. Actually,
Hey.
Deborah and I from Precision Effect are both on my registration, so I think that was a comment from Deborah. No problem.
Deborah, go for it.
No, so I was just I made a comment in the chat that was truly interesting about telehealth. I was on a conference yesterday for a bunch of organizations talking about end-of-life care. And one doctor was saying that doctors don't know how to end a telehealth meeting. You know, that's it. So there's all new practices here, and some of which we as marketers can help them with. Really thinking about conversations are different. They're different in video, and you're getting different cues. So I just think it really is such a brave new world out there, and so much opportunity for communicators.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And always a difficult conversation to have at the best of times, but of course we don't necessarily have that. We're not ready with the training yet. There's a space here for us as communicators, maybe to impart some of our knowledge, I think, to medical professionals to help them learn. We had another rather interesting question that came from the floor for all of the panel, actually, and feel free to whichever wants to jump in on this one. But do we think that COVID-19 and the focus that COVID-19 has placed on the healthcare sector will make having a career in the healthcare communications industry sexy again?
I think that's an interesting question for sure. And I think I think in some ways it's certainly made everyone understand what an important profession it truly is. And, you know, what a game changer. And you see as you're driving around in your local areas, I'm sure all the different signs that are outside that are talking about how important healthcare workers are. And it's really heartwarming. And so I think, yes, there's probably going to be more people wanting to go into it. I think though, also people are going to understand gravely how serious of a profession it is. I think that it's never been one that people have entered into lightly. And I think moving forward, even less so.
Great, thank you, Caroline. Another question for the panel from the floor. For some years, IBM was touted Watson as a game changer in remote diagnostics. Why has this not taken off? Did it miss the human element? I don't know who wants to grab that one. Anyone, any thoughts?
Well, I think that, from a digitization of healthcare perspective, I think we're still at the cusp, right? And we saw just recently, that transformation of telemedicine. And I think that's just the start. We're seeing so much more that we're all carrying around information on our wrists and in our pockets that are providing data. And I think that especially with the emergence of telemedicine, we're going to see much more of that come forward. And I think this is an opportunity for digitization, and particularly all those digital apps, to really have their moment in the sun. They've been trying very hard and languishing in the past 5 years, but I think that this is finally the moment in which that data and that information that they provide can ultimately really change and make those telemedicine appointments even more beneficial than we're currently seeing. And getting that data. And I think eventually we're going to see at-home health kits that are going to go out for folks, so that you can actually take your own readings and the physician can walk you through that. In fact, you're starting to see with clinical trials, those patients who come back online and are doing the clinical trials, and they're doing them remotely, are feeling that much better, having not had to actually go into a clinic itself. So I think that we're going to start to see much more of that. And so while IBM didn't necessarily hit the jackpot at the time, I think it certainly created a path.
Great, thank you very much. I think we've got time for just one more question before we have to close out for today. Another one for the floor, but generally open to the whole. Oh, sorry. Open to the whole panel. Truffle sees opportunities beyond geographic segmentation. Will healthcare shift to more global, less local approaches? How do the other panelists see this? Claire, maybe you want to kick off.
I think there is certainly so the provision of data and information at a global level that is then filtered down to a local level, which actually, if you look at the life cycle of pharma, has gone in over the last 20 years or so. But I think what it teaches us is there's a lot that we can do with global information, and then if we get the granularity, we make use of it at a local level. Will healthcare ever be a truly global piece? In terms of the patient, no, I don't think so. I think that the cultural nuances, and actually even the needs of the populations based on ethnicity, will deem that not really feasible. But from a product perspective, it will always be a global
Cool. Carolyn, I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
Sure. Well, I think one of the big pieces that COVID has shown us is how quickly the world can mobilize together against one foe. And I think that is, something that I hope continues. And that if we took one big initiative a year and we said, let's apply our best minds to this moving forward, gosh, what a difference that would make in the world. If we could go after Alzheimer's like this and say, you know what, we're all going to agree around the world that we're going to put our best brains and our best minds on solving that, and the academic institutions are going to focus there. I think that could just be an amazing thing. And so while maybe direct patient care might not change from a globalization perspective, I think the amassing of focus could be really powerful, as well as data. We're able to now see, and we're watching it around the world. This is the first time that we've actually watched data move around the world collectively as a human race, and say, okay, what's happening there, and how is that arriving here, and what does that mean, and where is it going to next? And that's really fascinating. I think that is going to impact human behavior in a really fascinating way.
Great, wonderful, and thank you. That's very, very uplifting, and I completely agree.
I do want to add to that, Paul, if I can be heard. Yeah, I think I've worked in consumer marketing and in pharma marketing, and what I find very interesting is that standardizing global communication to some extent is far more common in pharma marketing than it is in consumer marketing. And the interesting thing I've found is that because science is pretty much the same across the world, the human bodies are pretty much the same across the world, there's a lot more commonalities that we can derive when we're working in different parts of the world than we can in consumer marketing. So I find that piece really, really interesting. Carolyn hit the nail on the head in terms of just the vaccine being developed for COVID. There are pockets in Japan, India, China, US, Europe, UK, Germany, different elements as well, that where the exact same thing is happening. And we also see a lot of cross-global collaboration that's happening on that front. So I know that there's certain organizations in India that are gearing up for manufacturing vaccine doses that will be researched by other organizations, maybe in US or Europe. So I think that collaboration is only the beginning of what we are going to see, and that's going to be where the fun really starts.
Great. I think let's hope that the collaboration does kick in, and I think we're all agreed there are plenty more problems that if we put our minds to it, we can solve as a planet. That would be incredible. Everybody, we're almost out of time, so all it sort of lands to me to do is to thank our panel so much for their contributions today. It's been wonderful listening to you all, and to thank everybody who's taken their time to tune in and listen to us. You'll see on the screen now, there are the panel's contact details. If you wanted to get questions across to them and didn't have an opportunity, we're sorry we ran out of time today, but there are their email addresses. You can always reach out to them. You can always forward them to us here at the Network One, and we will, of course, forward them on. By way of a plug now, of course, we are running the Indie Forum Digital all week. We've got some more amazing presentations that are coming up over the next few days. And I'll be back tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, sorry, if you'd like to join us for the Independent Agency Showcase. We start that at 8 o'clock New York time, 1 o'clock UK time, 2 o'clock European time, and 8 p.m. Hong Kong time. We're handing over the digital floor and the virtual stage to 3 amazing leading independent agencies: Adwise from Russia, Government from Singapore, and Matter Unlimited from the United States. These agencies will be sharing their work, their cultures, what makes them special, what makes them leading independents, in what promises to be, I hope, an inspirational 55 minutes of presentation and conversation. So please do join the team and myself and the panelists who will be presenting tomorrow. You can register now if you wish. Please just go to thenetwork1.com. On the homepage, you'll find a banner across the top. You can click there, or you can go directly to thenetwork1.com, the-indie-forum-digital, and you can see everything that we're running this week. So finally, thank you again to our panelists. Thank you to everyone else who's joined us today, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon, mornings. Thank you.